Hello and welcome to The Analyst by Vajiram and Ravi, where we turn today's current affairs into clear exam-ready insights for UPSC. It's May 29th, 2026 and today's edition brings two important analysis articles for your upcoming mains exam. First, India-China talks on border delimitation. We will understand the diplomatic, strategic and security dimensions of one of Asia's most complex boundary disputes. Second, the Supreme Court's blow to the online gaming sector. We will examine the legal, regulatory and economic implications for India's rapidly growing digital economy. Finally, we will be also wrapping up the session with extremely focused prelims pointers, which will be highly crucial for your next prelims examination. So let's begin. So when we open the newspaper today, the very first article that we see is regarding India and China holding border talks. This is a very significant piece of article, especially for your mains examination, because when we have the mains examination in 2 to 3 months, we definitely can expect some questions from GS2 in IR regarding how the progress between the two countries have been in recent times regarding the improvement of ties between them. So this is where we will not only be discussing from GS2, we will also discuss the various dimensions of GS3, that is the border issues and internal security issues that also are posed due to this crisis. Now, that is where we are trying to sort out the issue after the COVID pandemic, where we had seen the Galwan issue. After that, both of the countries are realizing that we should be coming on the table and we should sort out and discuss it out and end the issues as soon as possible in a particular matter of time. So this is where we have to understand firstly what took place. Recently, India and China are in Beijing right now. They are talking to each other, where we have our Indian delegation and also the Chinese delegation is there. What we are talking on? We are talking on the boundary delimitation, the issues that we have on border, the mechanism through which we will be solving the issues, cross-border cooperation, so that such issues do not prop up in the coming future. While the matters that we discuss right now, the objectives that India and China want to have in the future, while may look to be quite simple in nature, but in essence they are highly complicated, because given the history of India and China and the issues that predate the recent times, the recent incidents, we have to carefully understand how this can be a very complicated thing at the heart of it. So when we talk about coming together, sitting and discussing and also coming to the point of agreeing and expressing satisfaction over peace efforts in recent times in border areas, we have to understand that we are trying to normalize the relation. So you can expect a question in the upcoming mains regarding the potential of the normalization of ties between the two countries. So this is how you have to answer it. Firstly, you have to define what do you mean by normalization in terms of India and Chinese relations. Firstly, when we talk about the normalization aspect, we have to know what happened before. So that is where we have to understand that the border dispute across around approximately 3,488 kilometers of India and China border. We have various sectors of the border. We have the western sector, middle and eastern sector. And all of these sectors are actually facing conflicts. Conflicts which started way back decades ago. Conflicts which have started also in the last decade. Right? And that is why we have to understand that the borders between the two countries have never been formally demarcated. Just understand one thing, that the colonial administration of the British was there in India, where we had complex amount of border charts. We have had various border demarcation with various other countries. But when it came to China, mainly with Tibet, right? Chinese government right now do not agree to the borders that the British demarcated way back then. And that is actually one of the main reasons which China claims that the British government actually miscalculated various boundaries. So this is what we also have to analyze right now, that the LAC right now which is there, the line of actual control, is not a legal border. India and China right now do not have any agreements, do not have any kind of legal definition of what constitutes India and China border. So, you know, on one side, Chinese occupation is seen in Aksai Chin. On the other hand, China claims that India has illegally occupied what they call as South Tibet. So this is what you have to keep in mind, that Chinese ambitions over a period of time, especially since 2010, have been leaning towards aggressiveness. And aggressiveness we do not only see on the Indian borders. We also see on South China Sea, right, where China time and again goes into quarrels and conflicts with Philippines, with various other South Chinese Ocean countries. So this is where we have to understand China since 2010s and 11 and 12, they have been following an active policy of being aggressive with your neighbors. And this is where Chinese policy of being in conflicts sometimes also give them benefits. This is what we have to understand, that whenever Chinese forces enter Indian borders, these are not by accident. Sometimes China tells that, okay, since we do not have any demarcated border, since we do not have any legal border, we do not know where our troops would be, we do not know to which extent our troops would cross, whether they can cross Indian legal border or not, right? So this is where gives rise to some contentions, that why China is deliberately coming into India and setting up camps. Even if you go to northeastern states, mainly in Arunachal Pradesh, even near Sikkim, you will see that some illegal constructions are done by China across just Indian last border villages with China. So they are installing various military camps, they're installing various settlements for local population of the Chinese territory. So this means that China has a deliberate attempt to go in conflict with their neighbors, right? And this is actually one of the main pillars of their even foreign policy. Now, when we understand why China has been doing this, we have to go way back to the first India-China war, the Sino-Indian War, which took place in 1962. And this is where China deliberately took attempt on India's goodwill. Way back in 1947, when India became independent, China and India were actually very close. We used to have a very famous nickname for the two nations, such as Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai. After that, what happened? After that, China took very, very high benefit of our goodwill. For example, when you have a friend, you have been helping that friend over a long period of time, and you definitely know that going in the future, they will never backstab you. But at the end of the day, what happens? The reality hits you, right? Some friends always backstab. Some of you can even relate. So this is what happened to us also. We suffered a humiliating defeat, and after that in 1967 we learned some of the things. We also gave some resistance. India performed way better in this particular conflict. But when we talk about these two wars, throughout these two wars, the Chinese troops started entering the borders, right? Started entering our borders. And this is where in 1988 Rajiv Gandhi, the prime minister back then, took some good measures to actually go to China and become one of the first Indian prime ministers to visit China after 1954. Also, we tried to invoke the Panchsheel, which I will also talk about in the upcoming slides. Now, 1993 and 1996 were marked by years where we tried to increase the peace talks between the two countries. But again, if you see, we forward in 2017, we also have had a very serious issue at the border where we have the Doklam crisis, right? So this is where the standoff lasted for more than 2 months. Chinese troops entered Doklam, and Doklam was very important, and it is still important right now for India. Why? Because if you understand the location, it is highly closely situated to the Siliguri corridor, which is also sometimes known as a chicken neck corridor. So if China is coming close to the Siliguri corridor, it can install its helicopter bases, aircraft bases. It can also install some anti-missile and missile launchers there surrounding the Doklam plateau. So this is where it also caused a concern for us. Then China did not stop. It again struck in April 2020, and also this conflict went on for 2-3 months, and even much more further, because this Galwan Valley crisis happened in Ladakh, right, where the Chinese troops deliberately came inside, right? They had some scuffle with our Indian counterparts, and that is where more than 20 Indian soldiers died. Unofficially, how many died, we do not even know right now. And one of our biggest martyrs were Colonel Santosh Babu. So he also gave his life away. So this means that Chinese incursions are not normal incursions. They have led to loss of human lives, Indian lives at the end of the day. So this is where we have to understand from the perspective of prelims. Mapping right now is very important, right? UPSC has been asking some questions in recent times where they are asking you the approximate locations of some areas. For example, say they can ask you tomorrow that, okay, when we talk about the Siachen Glacier, it is located to the east or west of the Aksai Chin region, or to the east or west of the line of control. They can also ask you some questions regarding the rivers and the mountains surrounding it. So you have to definitely be highly aware of the all sectors of the borders, right? Now, when we talk about the recent talks, that is the talks which we started having from 2023 onwards to right now 2026. Now, these talks have been focusing on reducing the tensions that we have had over the years, because we are neighbors. We also do a healthy amount of trade between ourselves. We also have good status as developing countries who can become developed in the years and the decades forward. So that is why, apart from the differences and various other international dimensions which we'll also be discussing, China and India seeks to become closer right now. But whenever we are trying to understand about normalization, India wants gradual normalization. Why? Because India has seen over the years we have fought so many wars, so many lives have been lost. Also, China has been constructing various border villages. It is also not recognizing our own sovereignty over Arunachal Pradesh, right? And this is also leading China to build various dams on the river of Brahmaputra in Chinese territory, right? And those dams can tomorrow be controlled by China to regulate the water that would flow into India. So in cases of any adverse relation that we may have with China in the future, what China can do, China can weaponize water. It can hold water and release water during various times when it can cause heavy amount of flooding in the northeast part of our country. So this is where India wants gradual normalization on each and every things that are stressing India and Chinese relations. So right now, take a time to tell me right now in the comments, what are the various things that we have discussed which are actually causes of concerns for India between China, right? You can try to summarize it and then we will try to understand. As of now, we have seen that 20 soldiers approximately have been killed. Also, 50,000 Chinese troops are still deployed across the borders. Also, 6 years of military standoff if you talk about the recent one. Because as of now, if the Chinese soldiers have entered Indian territory way back in 2020 when the world was dealing with COVID pandemic, Chinese authorities and military took advantage of it and entered India, right? So if this is going on even right now and if China has not yet backed down, right? So this is actually a cause of concern. And that is why the talks of disengagement, the term disengagement is very important to be used in your mains answer. It refers to the withdrawal of troops from the border of the either nations. For example, if we try to disengage, China would pull its 50,000 troops back from the disputed area of Aksai Chin back to their country. We will also try to do that. But this is not happening because the fraction and the points of conflicts are too wide. For example, when we talk about the Galwan Valley, we have tried to disengage over a period of time. Okay. Also, when we talk about the Gogra hot springs, we also have tried to disengage. But when we talk about the Depsang plains, it is still not being disengaged. And when we talk about the various amount of other points, there are still presence of Chinese soldiers here and there. They are trying to build various infrastructure. So that is where we have to understand that disengagement is the mantra of the time when we talk about improvement of India and Chinese relations. So let us actually discuss over the years from 2020 onwards till 2026. What are the various things that we did between ourselves? Firstly, we had a very major visit by our own Prime Minister to China because he participated in the 25th ASEO meeting in Tianjin. So our Prime Minister visited China. This is a very big event. If you can remember, in 2025, it was perhaps one of the major events throughout the entire year for us in the IR scenario. Because when a leader of a country visits another country, despite the various differences that we have, despite also the recent differences that we have, that is a very significant thing, okay, that the two countries are open for discussion right now. So this is the first thing. Second, when we talk about leaders, next comes the people of the country. So that is where the people of the country, for example in India, would love to go to Kailash Mansarovar, because that is one of the most sacred pilgrimage sites for all of the major Hindus in the country. So this means that since Chinese authorities are opening up the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra, it is a significant thing. For example, recently I had the pleasure of having an auto rickshaw drive in Delhi. So when I was asking and having a normal conversation with the auto driver, so he told me that one of the life's biggest ambition is to visit Kailash Mansarovar Yatra. So you can understand how that significant sacred place hold values in our hearts. So this can also go a long way into improving the people to people deficit between Indian and Chinese peoples, because obviously the regard that we have for Chinese citizens, right? Also, when we talk about the business scenario, this is what comes after people. When the people of the country is convinced that okay, flights are resuming right now, visa has been kind of relaxed right now, Kailash Mansarovar Yatra is kind of accessible, also tourists can go from here and there. Next comes investments. When Chinese businesses have been given a green signal in recent times. Why? Because when this conflict in 2020 took place, right, between India and China, India wanted to harshly impose various economic restrictions. So what we did, we tried to ban various games, right? If you can remember, PUBG, right? It was banned, including various other Chinese apps such as TikTok was also banned. Plus various other Chinese apps were also banned in India, right? This is the thing that we tried to took an indirect revenge on China. On the other hand, we tried to also restrict investments from China, because a lot of investments were coming in and flowing in from China. For example, that famous and infamous case of Paytm. Everyone knows that. Also, there were allegations that the HDFC Bank was heavily being invested by Chinese soldiers. So much so that the Chinese investors almost reached 2% of the total ownership of HDFC Bank. That means, if you can understand, HDFC Bank is such a very huge bank in the country. And if it is even controlled 2% by China, then majority of the financial decisions and the banking decisions in India would be taken in favor of the Chinese investors, right? So what we did, looking at all the scenarios such as PTM and HDFC, we tried to regulate Chinese investments after the Galwan Valley crisis. We tried to regulate the investments in such a way that any kind of foreign investment or FDI which would come from China would require the government approval. And if you have radiated economics well, you know that there are two ways of FDI coming into India. That is one, automatic route. That is, whenever the foreign investors would come into India, they need not take any government permission. For example, if there is 100% FDI allowed in a particular sector, that company can directly come, foreign company can directly come and set up the shop in India. But when we talk about government approval, the government will be looking at all of the proposals. How much money you are investing, how much land you are trying to buy, how much ownership you are having in that company. So everything will be monitored. And from 2020 to approximately 2025 end, we had that land border sharing policy. For example, whenever a Chinese or a Pakistani or a Bangladeshi or any other countries with which India shares a land border directly, they would need to come to Government of India and take Government of India approval. Without approval, they cannot invest in the country. But as of now, recently, if you can see, 2nd May 2026, the Finance Ministry has notified new FDI rules. What are these new rules? They tell that up to 10%, those land border sharing countries can automatically invest with reference to the sectors open for FDI in the country, right? Above that would require government approval. And this is a very significant thing. Why? Because We have so many solar industries in our country. We have so many industries based on pharmaceutical sector. So this is where we need to improve the various outcomes of the same due to the waste station crisis that we have. We need better economic prospects and also Chinese money. So that can also be better over a period of time. Also over a period of time, we have established military communication with each other between the countries themselves, reaching even to the top leaders in the military. So both of them have regular contact based on the border data sharing and intelligence sharing. Also, if you have just discussed right now, visa has been relaxed, flights have been allowed directly, and at the end of the day, our national security advisor, Mr. Ajit Doval, has also planned a travel to China where he will also be talking about various security review that is taking place. So this is where we have to understand, since the two countries are coming together and there is a good signal, that is where we have to keep in some key frameworks in our mind to write good points. For example, start with the Panchsheel, where we are trying to talk about mutual respect, non-aggression, non-interference, equality and peaceful coexistence, which was derived in 1954 and stands at one of the most constructive pieces of policy document between the Chinese and Indian cooperation. Also, when we talk about the Wuhan Consensus in 2018, we tried to establish in policy wording that differences should not be allowed to become disputes. It is very, very common for the neighbors to have differences, right? You can also reflect from your own life. When we were kids, we always have seen some conflicts going on between the neighbors, and sometimes the neighbors and ours also, right? So neighbors always will be facing some kind of differences. Some differences will be there, right? But those differences should not go on to become disputes, है ना? Also, a very significant thing happened when Chinese president visited India, and at the Mahabalipuram, the two leaders had a significant meeting, right? And this is where we also carry on that legacy. Also, when we talk about the three mutuals which India and China tried to broker after the Galwan crisis, this was mutual respect, mutual sensitivity and mutual interest. Also, India's approach towards China in the recent decades have been 3 no's and 1 yes, such as no confrontation, no competition, no containment, and yes in cooperation on shared interest. And at the end of the day, the Kazan framework, which was recently adopted also, it tried to agree on disengagement as the prerequisite for normalization. So India tried to stress that, okay, China and India needs to become close. So that is why New Delhi must stress on only one fact, that is disengagement. You try to vacate our borders as soon as possible, and then only we will be trying to discuss other issues. Now, for example, China. China has also some of the intentions, because China does not do anything for free. So what it keeps in mind that, for example, China and US always fights with each other. Mostly on the public domain, you see Mr. Trump announcing some tariffs on China, and China becomes worried because US is a very, very big market for China. And what is the second big market? India. So that is why bilateral trade has a very, very big role to play when we talk about why China is trying to improve ties with India, right? And also, if China wants to improve the bilateral trade, right, it has to also keep in mind that India also must be prevented from becoming too close to US. While that is not possible from China's own ambitions, because India has its own strategic autonomy. India has its own military consensus and economic consensus with the Western partners, while China has its own thinking on these lines. And that is why we see such developments. On the other hand, China is also concerned that India's infrastructure push across our border villages, right, for example, via the Jojila tunnel, also the various amount of border roads we are trying to construct, mainly the Vibrant Villages program, which is an holistic program not only to build and better the border infrastructure, but also to provide livelihood to the local people. China is actually very concerned with our own military installations and livelihood developmental infrastructure that we are doing near LAC, right? So that is why China is also trying to back off as of now. And at the end of the day, Indian military purchases from its Quad partners and its Western partners are increasing. We are trying to have more increasing closeness with even Russia, despite the conflict that Russia has with perhaps most of the world, right? So despite that, China is trying to keep India on a balanced approach. And India, in my opinion, has a better bargaining chip too in this entire aspect. So this is where we have to understand in this new global order which is emerging, a global order full of chaos, full of conflict. Maybe we are actually in a transition phase where actually before the COVID pandemic, right, the world was actually kind of stable, right? But after the COVID pandemic, we have seen so many instances of chaos, so many instances of conflict. So I think that the world is going via transition. And India has a very, very important role to play in this transition, particularly in maintaining good relations with the global South countries. India is also in good books with the Western countries. So that is why China also sees these as an opportunity not to irritate India too much, not to actually provoke India too much on the global arena. Though sometimes we definitely have differences, notable differences, ideological differences on the global platforms too. But at the end of the day, again, we have to keep in mind, differences should not go on to become disputes, right? So that is why we have to take some way forward. For New Delhi, what we have to keep in mind, we have to fight with the negotiations, not with arms, for complete disengagement. We have to also keep in mind that in all of these things, we should not allow China to dictate us, because India has its own strategic autonomy, right? And also at the end of the day, any issues on the Brahmaputra river front should be dealt with data sharing, because the data sharing based on waters and the water flow is very important for us to analyze whether China is doing some naughty tricks on the river or not. Also, when we talk about our own economics, we need investments, yes. We need to improve our solar industry, pharmaceutical industry, where Chinese investments can play a very, very good role in technology transfer. We also need Chinese investments in AI too. For example, China has went way ahead of India when it launched DeepSeek and various other Chinese AI startups. So directly and indirectly, we can have some collaborations with their own educational institutions, if not commercial AI startups, and try to understand how they have done that, so that we can also do that at a very cost-effective scale. Also, we have to maintain people-to-people contact. We have to also keep the military present, and diplomatic negotiations must go on. So this is what comes to the end of the topic here. This was a very lengthy topic, but a required one given the mains exam which is coming on. So this is where practice this question. Now we will be moving on to the next one, where we will look into the recent Supreme Court judgment on the online gaming industry. And this is where the Supreme Court has upheld the 28% retrospective GST on online gaming. And this is a very, very big challenge to the 9 billion sector in our country. Now, we have to talk about games. Not the games that we play on a daily basis, but there are some games which come actually directly and indirectly under gambling. So we are going to talk about them, because from the perspective of GS2 and GS3, we have to talk about how this is important for the country as a Supreme Court decision, and finally what the implication it has for the rest of the sector. Now when we talk about online gaming, I know all of you are familiar with it. All of us has played such games such as PUBG, such as various other Ludo games that we play over the online platforms, right? So these are actually what constitute the gaming sector in the country, right? And one of the activities which angered our parents most in our childhood, right? But as of now, you will be also kind of understanding that fact that sometimes gaming can have economic considerations. So there will be some very highly skilled gamers. If you have also seen in the area of some combat games and some other domains, Counter-Strike and various other games, you can also let me know in the comments, right? That is actually a platform where those games have huge audiences. For example, you can prefer a game and you can prefer someone playing that game and watch her or him play online on YouTube, on various streaming platforms. So that generates a huge amount of audience, and whenever audience come, businesses obviously will be coming with more advertisements, with new products. So gaming has become a very significant tectonic shift when we talk about a new economic area. So there are some people who are pursuing gaming as a career because the potential that they have is simply immense. For example, by 2027, they are expected to reach $316 billion, right? And that is where we have to understand, in India, we have 20% of the global gaming base. Just imagine about the opportunities that we have, right? Also, India attributes to 15% of the global gaming app downloads. We have almost 500 million online gamers. 1100 million daily active gamers are there. I hope that some of my audience are not one of these gamers, because for us, UPSC exam is much more important than mastering one game or having 20 kills and becoming famous between our friends, right? And this is where understand that economic aspects are there for the gaming industry, and that is why we have also seen there are so many kind of games. So generally we do not have any issues with the games which involve skill. For example, someone who is playing FIFA, mobile game, right, and also a console game, PC game, where we are trying to play as football players, right? And especially when the World Cup is approaching, this game is also right now becoming very popular. Also talk about the Counter-Strike, talk about PUBG. So all these games require a little bit of practice, skill, and then only you will see that pro gamers are there who are playing way better than you because they have practiced a lot. So there are some aspects in gaming which involve skill, right? But there are some other games which are totally based on luck and chance. For example, definitely some of you have played or participated in some games which are known as fantasy cricket leagues. For example, you have to go there and sign up, add money of your own money. You have to add your own physical money, say 100 rupees. What do? You add to the wallet of that particular game. I'm not mentioning any companies, right? Then you add the wallet. Then you go on to predict, for example, between Delhi Capitals versus RCB, who is going to win, which player is going to become the man of the match or the highest scorer or highest wicket taker, and so on. So what do? You do everything before the game itself, because the IPL match has not yet started, and you try to load money to your wallet and try to predict who will win. So you tell me, is it a skill or it is a chance thing? Many people will tell that it is also a skill, because I know that this player will be performing good. I know that that player will be taking some wickets. But what happens if that player is having a breakup right now? Will he be able to take the wickets in the next game? Then your 100 rupees will go on, right? So this is what we have to keep in mind, that real money gaming is our concern. We are not talking about the legal games which are based on skill. We are talking about the games which are based on luck or chance, because that is the area where what happens. Many people with their hard-earned savings make it their lifelong ambition to earn that 1 crore which is showed in one of the advertisement of this kind of games, of this kind of fantasy cricket games or fantasy league games or whatever you call them. So they try to bet their entire lifetime savings just to earn that 1 crore, because they assume that, okay, if I can predict well and if I win that kind of thing of 1 crore rupees, it can change my life. So this is where many of the Indians from vulnerable sections of the population, they got trapped. And that is why the government came up with a very, very strict law in 2025, which is known as a PROG Act. It is trying to outrightly ban this kind of money-based games, where this act stands for Promotion and Regulation of Online Gaming Bill 2025, which became an act also. Now, it is telling that in India, no person may offer any online games in India, which is actually money-oriented, not the other kind of games. Also, these are the games which promote online betting, gambling, lotteries, card games such as poker, rummy, fantasy sports offering cash rewards, all of these games. And if someone is opening it, 3 years fine, 1 crore penalty. If some influencer is also promoting it, because some of the influencers sometimes dance and promote those kind of games, they will be getting also jail, plus even fines, right? Also, banking has been regulated. For example, how much money you can add to your wallet or not, right? So banks have been barred, not been allowed to let you add any kind of money also. And this is where the distinction has been made, that these kind of games are actually chance based game, and this is actually applied to all kind of money based game. It doesn't matter whether you are skilled in that or not. If you are playing using money, you are straight away not allowed to do that, right? And if you can look into the rules, what we are trying to do, we are trying to regulate and ban the money games. The other kind of games, they are actually going on. Now, how you can actually classify if a game is money or not? So authority will be determining. And who will be the authority in the country? This is the Online Gaming Authority of India. It is under the Ministry of IT, chaired by Additional Secretary. You have to keep this in mind for your prelims examination, because in the next year you have to be prepared because of the recent trends that we have just seen, right? Also, this has representatives from the Home Affairs Ministry, Finance, INB, Youth Affairs, Sports, Law, Justice too. Just keep in mind, right? So what have to be kept in mind is, firstly, how a game is classified, the authority is going to decide. Authority will be doing a test. The test will be based on whether the game has any kind of element in which you have to add money and play, right? So that will be also be tested. Also, any kind of game which is coming and becoming registered in India, they should be given 90 days time to the government to do this complete test, right? And this is where you have to keep in mind that such a very strict act is necessary right now to protect our peoples, mainly the children, who should not be playing with money at that particular tender age, right? On the other hand, we have various esports, we have various social games, such as the things that we have just discussed, FIFA, Call of Duty and all those things. Those are still harmful for the children, but at the end of the day, they do not involve that money factor, right? Sometimes they can also involve subscriptions. That is also something that the government also has to take care of by educating the parents and everything. But at the end of the day, when we are talking about this kind of games, this actually kind of make the people more addicted. Also prevent illegal financial activity too, because when we talk about the main reasons for the ban, it is not only where our money is getting lost in those kind of games there, but the dark patterns. The main problem that we have with them is the dark patterns that they deploy. For example, some of the games you have definitely seen that they tell you that you can earn 1 crore, that you can actually add 100 rupees and you will be getting plus 200 rupees as wallet balance. So what are these? These are some of the tactics which are marketing tactics to attract more customers, है ना? Also, those dark patterns are mainly trapping the people who do not have effective education, not good literacy backgrounds, right? And depleting the money of the people. Also, some of these platforms, these gambling platforms, are used directly against India because there are so many cybercrime threats. For example, cyberbullying is a phenomena which take place by this kind of platforms. Second thing, which is much more serious, is where we have the aspect of money laundering happening via these kind of games. Because what happens if someone has huge black money, that person, what will they will do? They will add the money in the wallet, है ना? And what they will do? They will try to play some games there, poker and all those fantasy games, and they will try to at least get some rewards there. And when that particular person will be getting rewards, that particular reward will be shown as white money. Also, there can be some people who can use the chat boxes. These games have some chat box where you can connect and chat with the players also. Those chat boxes have also been found by those various infiltrators which come from Bangladesh, Pakistan, Nepal, and they try to coordinate various attacks in India using those chat boxes too. So you can understand such a huge security concern. And at the end of the day, people who play games, also my audience who is playing games right now, my dear students, they have to keep in mind that excessive gaming is not good for your mental health. Because the day you will be playing more than 6 hours, 8 hours, sometimes there are some people who plays even more than 12 hours per day, right? So those particular candidates have issues in sleep. They talk less with people, do not interact with family, academic performance definitely goes down. They become much more obese in nature, and generally the non-communicable diseases such as diabetes, cardiovascular diseases, they catch up, and various other things, for example violence, inability to maintain a job. These are all the issues associated with this kind of gaming. And at the end of the day, which is our main concern in this discussion, is the revenue leakage which the government of India is looking at. Because when we talk about the regulation of the online gaming industry, mainly the money-based gaming industry, in 2023, our parliament actually amended the Central GST Act, because the online money gaming was included in the 28% GST slab, which is the highest GST slab. And the government of India told that whenever a person will be adding, for example, 100 rupees to wallet, instantly minus 28% GST. Because we do not want the people to play more of these games, right? So one of the ways is actually to penalize by having more tax. So the government of India passed this. It was a good thing. But what the companies did, what these gaming companies did, they go into the various high courts of the various states. So some of the main arguments for them was that, firstly, the central government is imposing this tax. This tax is imposed presently. Also, the government is telling that they will tax my earnings from a previous date. For example, if I have been playing from 2018 till 2023, so there was no 28% GST, nothing was there. After 2023, I have to pay 28% GST whenever I am playing the game, such as money-based games. Now what is happening? The government is telling that from 2018, 19, 21, 2 and 3, so 6-7 years, you have to pay the previous GST bills also based on 28%. This is what do you mean by retrospective tax. The tax which applies from the past, right? So based on the number of years a particular person has played, right? That particular person maybe need not pay the taxes, but the company had to pay the GST bills. So that has come to around almost 1 lakh rupees of GST or more than that. So that is what they are complaining with. And what they have done, they went to various high courts of the various state governments. And what these companies have done, they went to the various high courts in the various states. They told that, okay, firstly, the government is telling that this is a retrospective tax. Retrospective tax is not good for a nation. That I also agree, for some of the business operations, not for these gambling operations. Second argument that they are telling that, okay, the government is telling that this is a game of chance, but this is a game of skill. The companies are arguing, right? The Supreme Court told that, go away, right? This is not a game of chance. This is purely a game of luck. Anything can happen in a cricket match. Anything can happen in a game of cards, rummy. These are not, those things where you can use probabilities, some theorems, or say some Bayes theorem, if I can remember my class 12 probability chapter, right? Those things do not apply here, because there is no particular character like that character in Hangover Alan, who used to calculate in his mind regarding the various poker games that he used to play. So in real life, those things do not happen. You're talking fictional. So the Supreme Court directly told that 28% retrospective tax on online gaming is valid, right? So Supreme Court has allowed that. And at the end of the day, Supreme Court has told that this is a game of chance purely, right? And remember, previously the companies went to the various high courts. The high courts, some of them agreed also that this is a game of chance. Supreme Court also totally tried to transform everything. That previous orders given by Karnataka High Court, for example, to some companies, they are actually not valid anymore, right? And the most important thing is that the number of tax that we have tried to demand from those gaming industry is around 2.5 lakh crore, which is insane, right? So firstly, let us discuss both of the sides, positives and negatives. Firstly, positives, we know that the youth and the consumers will be protected right now. The money will not be lost in gambling. We will also increase our tax base. More tax revenue can be collected here in this way. And anti-money laundering activities, anti-terror financing activities will be supported right now. Also, legal clarity will be there as to what is a game of chance and what is a game of skill. And at the end of the day, India is a sovereign country. We have the right to tax based on this kind of economic aspects that we see. But on the other hand, some experts and some of the various lawyers, they also tell that this is a $9 billion industry. If you can look at some of the countries such as UK, they have lower charges. Australia, they have lower charges. India, for example, is having perhaps the highest kind of charges here. Also, if you can understand retrospective taxation, even when we talked about the Vodafone idea case, retrospective tax is not seen as a very good thing for investors, because investors do not want to come and do business in India and want to pay the previous taxes also, right? So, but in my opinion, in this particular case, it is not a kind of a taxation we are doing. It is a kind of a penalty we are trying to impose. Also, what about the jobs that those companies, that money giving companies provided to many youth, many managers, many ground level workers lost their jobs, right? Many IT sector people also lost their jobs. Also, when we talk about the offshore platforms, there are many right now, and these are the ones which are active in India via various other channels. They are sometimes not listed on the Play Store. They actually ask you to download the APK from Google Chrome or any other say Safari or any other browser that you use, right? Once you download the APK, you can add money using cryptocurrency and various other things. So as of now, the menace is not gone yet, because there are other kind of apps also doing the same thing. Also, some people are telling that this 2.5 lakh crore demand is too much, and that is why it can also have a chilling effect on the digital economy too, because there are some payment platforms also which were kind of taking care of those say transactions, so they also lost their opportunities. Now that is why you have to keep in mind that this action was needed because of the larger negative it was doing and posing to the society. As of now, government is also doing various other steps. As of now, we have 3 tier classification. For example, online games which are based on money is totally banned. What are allowed? Esports which are registered under National Sports Governance Act, and various online games which are on social media. On the other hand, we are also partnering with banks to totally ban even those other apps which are outside the Play Store. Next, we are blocking the domains, the website names, the IP addresses in this way. Also, we are having mandatory eKYC for some of the listed games. Next, anti-addiction measures we are trying to propose that gamers must be following. Also, the gaming companies must be having within their own app. And at the end of the day, 3-tier grievance redressal system also has been adopted. So this is where we have to keep in mind even a legal history. For example, the first case here is trying to regulate that rummy is not a game of skill. In the second case, in the Lakshmanan case at the Supreme Court clarified that even horse racing and the baiting that goes on is also not a game of skill. So these are all game of chances. Finally, you have a question. Please do let me know what is the answer. And now we'll be moving on to the prelims pointers, where we are going to understand the main data that we are getting from the national health accounts, which have surveyed from the years of 2022-23, and this is the latest data as we are getting as 2026. So all of the things that we are going to discuss here will be highly important for your upcoming mains exam. So it is time to update your data books, because here we are mainly and generally going to discuss the data and the implications. And given the recent 2026 prelims trend, I will not be surprised if they tomorrow give you the data only, and they will be giving you 4 options and more 4 options to analyze the data and tell what the data mean for the overall healthcare sector. So firstly, understand some key terms. So this is where we get that whenever we are talking about health and the money that we are trying to spend on the health sector as a government, we get the term known as total health expenditure. The term itself means that we are trying to include all kind of health infrastructure, all kind of health supplies, medicines, doctor fees, everything. Every single health expenditure is included under the THE. The THE also includes capital investments. For example, installation of some good diagnostic clinics or some good capital equipments in the hospitals and various other big machinery that some of the hospitals have. So that also comes under total health expenditure. And at the end of the day, we have current health expenditure. This is actually the final consumption of healthcare goods and services, excluding the capital expenditure. So you can understand, for example, the money that we spend on medicines, on doctor fees, on various clinic visits, on some x-ray scan. These are actually under the CHE. So you can understand that CHE will be actually be more ground based. That means this is the total expenditure that we as a say citizen class we expend, right? So how much we are expending? 7.6 lakh crore, right? Out of this, how much the government is doing? 3.85 lakh crore. The state governments are bearing the most of the burden at 63%. Just imagine. Because at the end of the day, most of the government schemes which are implemented by the state governments, right? And the union government 36%. The household burden, for example, at the end of the day, for example, your house, my house, everyone is spending the highest, that is 56.4%. That means it is not the insurance companies that they are paying or the government or say the private companies. It is actually the people at the end of the day who are spending out of pocket from their own savings, right? So this is a major fiscal implication. For example, the government as of now spends around 1.43% of the total aspects on our health, right? Now this has actually marginally increased by only 0.3% from 2013 to 14 level. Just imagine, 1 decade ago we were spending 1.15%, right now we are spending 1.43. Very important for your notes right now. Also, when we talk about the budgetary priority, so as of the budget, it gets around approximately 5%, 4.9%, right? So it has also marginally increased by around 2% only. Also, the per capita spending as of now in India is 2,786 on health, which has increased 2.7 times. Just imagine, spending has increased 3 times, but the increase in allocation is not going up to that level. Also, why we are trying that this is way less? Because actually the WHO recommends that at least 5% of the GDP should be spent on healthcare. Even our own policy, the National Health Policy 2017, not an old one, but 2017, it is telling that we have to spend up to around 2.5% of the GDP. As of now, it is only 1.43%, right? Also, if you can see that before the COVID pandemic, we actually used to spend 35.3, right? But actually during the COVID pandemic, we actually invested a lot of money in medicines, in vaccines. So a little bit of expenditure we had at 41%, but again it declined down. So that means that healthcare expenditure is actually kind of a warning signal in the country. Look at more things. For example, the out-of-pocket expenditure that the people of the country are doing is at 50% almost, right? Because the insurance companies, the health insurance companies, right, when we talk about at the government side, it is only 3%. So the government related health insurance is at 3%. Private health insurance expenditure actually that we are getting is only 9.2%. Imagine a scenario where a person is getting a treatment from an hospital. That person has an insurance. So the person, if he has a government insurance, only 3% of the expenditures are given finally at the end of the day. If it is at private, only 9.2%. What about the rest of the money? It is coming out of the pocket. That is why 50%. 50% of the expenditure people are doing from their own pocket. Just imagine, because that is why it is told that Indians are just one major hospital bill away from poverty. And most of the Indians are. Also, where the money actually is flowing towards private hospitals, if you see. Private hospitals are expensive. That is why a majority of the health expenditures are made at that end. Private pharmacies, 21%. Then the government hospitals at 16.73. So this is the money that the government is spending on us. Say on free healthcare, on subsidized healthcare, on insurance cost. So see how less it is How 16.73 is so less? And also at the hospitals, if you understand, most of the treatment are of curative care. If some person has some issue, a disease, that person is cured. 56% of those kind of expenditures are based on that, not on preventive care. Preventive care, like you go to the hospital, you take some scans, you actually have a good habit of understanding a disease and catching it before it develops, right? And why this is happening? Why more curative care? Because most of the Indians right now are facing the burden of non-communicable diseases. 60% of the deaths between 22 and 24 happen due to this. That is why government also has been taking some concrete actions to increase spending on our healthcare. Firstly, we have expanded the Ayushman Bharat for the senior citizens. We also are giving the Ayushman Vay Vandana cards. And we have extended that to all of the senior citizens above 70 years of age. That is a good signal because senior citizens face the highest amount of burden of healthcare and also the expenditures. Also, the budget allocations has been 1.06 lakh crore, which is a 10% increase over the last year, right? Research and development, for example, has been increased by 24%. The total fund is around 4,821 crores. Right? Also, when we talk about the Pradhan Mantri Bharatiya Jan Aushadhi Pariyojana, this is one of the most important schemes. Why? Because we are talking about generic medicines. Generic medicines, for example, like paracetamol can cost you 200 rupees per sachet. They can also cost you 10 rupees per sachet. Now, are these qualities different? Not much. They are 99% or 95% of the same quality. But there are some of the companies and the startups in India, such as Z Labs and various other companies, who are trying to reduce the supply chain costs and try to manufacture the medicines which are actually in the public domain. For example, they do not require to pay any kind of patent cost and various other things. So that is why right now we are having more generic medicines at cheaper costs, right? Due to this kind of program. And also we have a national health claims exchange, so as to gather data on how much insurance is actually paid, and we can also go on to complain and file charges against some insurance companies who are not paying us. Recently, the government also reduced custom duties on 17 cancer drugs, reducing the cost burden. And at the end of the day, we also have the Pradhan Mantri Ayushman Bharat Health Infrastructure Mission, where we are having 64,000 crore invested in healthcare infrastructure, focusing mainly on the primary healthcare centers and various other hospitals, diagnostic labs, better capital expenditure in this sector. So this was all for this one. Now we'll be moving on to the next one, which is discussing about why right now the anti-dumping duties are kind of a concern, which is a paradox. Why? Let us understand firstly what is meant by dumping and anti-dumping duty. Imagine that China manufactures some chemicals, right? Now China can do it at a highly low cost because China has developed industry over the years, and that is why the MRP of that chemical in India can be higher than that of China, right? Now since we understand that China is a cost-effective country, it can supply that same material or same chemical at a lower MRP in the country, right? And intentionally it will be lowering the MRP even more, because what it's tried to do, it will be trying to dump in large quantities. It will be sending those chemical containers in large quantities to India and dump it at very, very low prices. Now what will happen to the companies in India which manufacture that chemical at a little bit higher MRP? No one will be buying their products. So those factories will be shutting down. Local production will be going down, and that is why the government imposes some equivalent tax, the difference of the MRP of the Indian companies and the dumped Chinese products. That difference is actually known as the anti-dumping duty, because China subsidizes the production, the private production, by giving its own money. the own government money to the private companies so that they can artificially reduce the prices, and those prices and those products can come into India at lower cost and people can demand more of them. So the government of India is clever. It detected this trick of China and imposed various duties. Now those duties are actually imposed in various sectors, right? Now in the chemical sector, this is right now causing a kind of a concern. You know, the Iran issue is going on. West Asian shock is still there, where the barrel prices are fluctuating above and below $100, and similarly the stock market is also fluctuating like anything madly. So what is happening right now, since petrol, chemicals and mainly the petrochemicals are high in demand in various sectors, so that is why right now the importers are telling that in India we are not getting crude oil as raw material for the petrochemical industry. So forget the local production. The factories are gradually shutting down. Now, what to do? Let us liberate, let us actually try to discount the anti-dumping duties for the time being, till the crisis is over. Because that would, as of now, try to give relief to our own local companies. Now, one task for you is that, using your common sense, can you tell me whether anti-dumping duty is under the WTO framework or not? Because WTO is very, very concerned with the amount of duties you impose. So let me know whether they are under the WTO framework or not. Now, let me give you some examples, then you will get to understand. For example, in the textile industry, we need elastomeric fiber yarn and viscose rayon filament yarn. Why am I naming this? Because these are in your article, and tomorrow in the prelims exam they can tell you that these are used in which industry. These are used in the textile sector as raw materials. These are actually inputs. Downstream inputs are those inputs which are actually required from the very first stage onwards if you go on to build a product. So for the textile industry, these are downstream inputs, and these inputs require petrochemicals. If the petrochemicals are not available, how we can manufacture it? And you know that the textile industries employ perhaps the most people after the agricultural sector, right? And also 40 petrochemical products are running out of stocks, and that is where we have to take some emergency measures. So right now we are trying to agree on one point, that we temporarily have to reduce the anti-dumping duties mainly in the chemical sector, right? Because we have to understand most of the anti-dumping duties are actually applied on China, because they have been doing these dumping activities for a long period of time. And also we have had various investigations which we found that China has been doing all this kind of dumping activities. But perhaps right now we are so helpless that we have to take help of that as of now, right? Temporarily. Because it is not that we are facing this crisis only due to West Asian conflict, but we are ourselves at blame, because over the years we did not transform our manufacturing sector. We did not have more industries in the chemical sector to be set up, right? So that the cost advantage would have been in India, but that is not there as of now. So that is why the DPIIT has recently announced a blueprint that we have to indigenize chemical production in the country. We have to try to have self-reliance in the country itself, so that 200 highly import dependent petrochemical items can be made totally Atmanirbhar, right? And that is where we can also save $50 billion annually. Because we have $31 billion trade deficit, right, based on the chemical sector itself. Now this is not only with China but with other countries too, because according to a NITI report we have found this out. So we have to save our import bill, we have to become Atmanirbhar, and we have to, maybe as of now, maybe according to consultation with various industrial experts and the government, relax some of the provisions of the ADD on China too. So let us now move on to the next article, where we will be firstly looking at the Pragati portal, because the Prime Minister chaired the 51st Pragati meeting. So here we know that every month on the 4th Wednesday, the Prime Minister will be taking heed of the various infrastructural projects going on in the various parts of the country. It will also look into what are the various funds which are designated, how those funds are being spent, via this three-tier structure. So in Delhi, our Prime Minister will be present. Via video conferencing, the union government secretaries also will be there regarding the concerned ministries, and mostly on every Wednesday all of the ministries are present, and also the chief secretaries of the various states. Now this is a very, very good model of good governance, because recently even various UK universities, even Oxford, praised the government of India for timely monitoring of the various products directly at the Prime Minister's level. So this is actually a good practice that other nations follow from India. Now, why this is a very good model? Because even the DM, the district collector, who is not at the level of chief secretary, right, who is actually tasked with the implementation of the various projects, starting from the central to the state to the district level. So even the DM is accountable through these meetings directly and indirectly. The DMs sometimes are even called to this meeting if at all there are some mismatches in the implementation of some projects or so on. So in the future, do not do some work for which you will be called to this meeting to give some, say performance aspects, and here you should be called for good performance, right? You should be getting that recognition from the Prime Minister directly, so that right now you have to have highest standards of ethical quality. So in this portal, moving on, we have various other parameters too. For example, we have digital data management, and mainly we have grievance redressal too. For example, most of the citizens, they have some issues with the infrastructure project. We can go on to the CP Grams and we can file our complaint. Now this complaint will not be reviewed by the Prime Minister directly, but they will be reviewed by the chief secretaries and the various officers under them, and even the union government secretaries too. So either way, the problem will be looked at. So that is why you also, as of now, we are all aware citizens, responsible citizens. If we see some issues, we can go onto the portal and report it, right? So it will be taken care of. Also, video conferencing is taken care of, and this is how the communication is established. And also, if the Prime Minister is telling that, okay, I want right now real-time monitoring of some road project or metro project, show me right now. So the secretaries can also show them, because this Pragati portal is linked with our Bhuvan and ISRO satellites. And our Prime Minister is a heavy taskmaster. He believes in proper implementation of projects and timely implementation. And that is why, if you have seen over the years, our infrastructural projects have been made a little bit better. Also, we will be taking some of the key aspects which were the main highlight at the Pragati meeting. Firstly, the Prime Minister focused on water governance. He observed that there are so many states which have conflicts between themselves due to water sharing. So firstly, he cited that the Ken-Betwa river interlinking project, which is trying to link the rivers of Ken and Betwa across Uttar Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh, which also has Panna Tiger Reserve, Ken Gharial Sanctuary in middle, right? So this is where this interlinking will be done, right, via the Dhodhan Dam, and this is going on as of now, and this will be providing a huge amount of hydropower. And if you can also understand the nature of the questions as of now, they can also ask you that which of the river is located on a higher plane. It is the Ken River, which is located on a higher plane, and that excess amount of surplus water from Ken will be flowing into Betwa and will be collected in a reservoir, mainly at the Dhodhan Dam, which has a storage capacity of around 3000 million cubic meters, right? Now, this is what we are trying to do as of now, which will be providing a huge amount of water for irrigation, drinking, and also livelihood for the people. Environmental experts, they complain that the Panna Tiger Reserve and the protected area surrounding it will be submerged due to the huge inundation, because the Ken directly passes via the Panna Tiger Reserve, right? So this is what the concerns are, but the Prime Minister tried to actually promote that Ken-Betwa project is a model for the other states to adopt, because hardly we have seen any kind of conflicts between these two states at the national level. But when we talk about the other states, you can also let me know in the comments below who are actually facing issues between water sharing in this framework. Also, the Prime Minister told, apart from the river linking projects, we need more canal networks. We need to install more solar panels. And this is where we have to ensure that clean energy is used for irrigation. On the other hand, our Prime Minister also focused on the importance of cleanliness, as he always does, by focusing on the Swachh Bharat Mission 2.0 in the urban areas by setting up more waste to energy plants. So that we need more infrastructure. In the previous analyst, I also discussed regarding the gasification plants and the various other types of wastes as to how they can be converted into energy plants, right? And at the end of the day, the Prime Minister also encouraged that we have to complete projects on time, right? So timely completion is also attributed to lower cost. Extra focus has been given on ports, mainly the Vadhavan port. In the comments, let me know in which state it is located. And here, the Prime Minister is focusing on an overall kind of a project. Port to rail to highways to inland waterways, freight corridors, and at the end of the day, airports. Everything must be linked on a single platform. So this was all for this one. Now we'll be moving on to the next one, where we will be coming back to Donald Trump, because he is right now encouraging some other countries to join the Abraham Accords. Abraham Accords, by the name of it you can understand, is actually trying to pay tribute to Jews, to Christianity, and to Islamic religion, because more or less they have some of the common references in their holy texts. That is also Abraham. Also, when we talk about the accords here, we already know that Israel had issues with various Muslim nations. But since 2010s, Israel has actually tried to become more close to countries such as Saudi Arabia and other Middle Eastern countries except Iran, which Israel sees as an existential threat, and Iran also feels the same way in a vice versa manner, right? So Iran and Israel thing has always been going on, and Israel, that is why since 2010 is becoming more close with the Gulf countries and some of the Middle Eastern countries. So this is when we have to understand that in 2020 this culminated by an effort by US. Donald Trump was also back then the president of the US in 2020 when these accords were signed, which is seen as a joint strategic diplomatic statement brokered by the US to normalize the relationship between Israel and the several Arab and Muslim majority nations. So back then, Israel definitely was a part of this signatory, UAE and Bahrain. So these were the countries which became more close to Israel. Later, Morocco would join because US had promised that in Western Sahara region, Morocco had some conflicted territory. So US would support Morocco in their efforts. US also told Sudan that, okay, I will be supporting your demand for Khartoum region, which is also disputed by Sudan. So US is giving kind of, lollipops to various countries to let them support this Abraham Accord initiative. And right now, recently, Kazakhstan also joined. Right? So we have to understand, way back in 1967, in the Khartoum resolution, it was declared that there would be no peace with Israel, mainly from the Arab and Muslim majority nations side. Even though negotiations. Coming from that, just understand what US has did. US had tried to shift the Israeli position, which was traditional, to the new paradigm that we see right now. For example, previously, the Muslim Arab nations did not at all recognize Israel because they recognized Palestine, right? And this was actually decided in Arab Peace Initiative 2002 also. But right now, normalization is done, because normalization right now is between Israel and the Middle East, and based on their own national economic and security interests. Right now, they're forgetting their past, right? Which is a good thing also. Also, the primary regional threat was previously seen based on Israel. And Israel was seen as an existential threat to the entire Arab world. So that they formed this kind of indirect reference. Also right now, what we see is that Shia and Sunni divide is seen right now because of Iran. And Iran, is also hostile with other Middle Eastern countries, right? So that is why right now it is like Israel plus Middle East and US and Iran. So US is trying to diplomatically isolate Iran in this way. It is even targeting Saudi, Qatar, Pakistan, Turkey, Egypt and Jordan to join the accords, right? And it is not joining as of now, because we have to understand they are only actually taking their time. And why US is wanting Saudi Arabian country to join these accords? Because Saudi Arabia is seen as the holy grail of the Middle East. We have the Mecca and Medina there, and that is where if Saudi does something significant like this, then it can also send an entire message to the entire Muslim countries, where US wants unified regional security, because US is spreading this thing about Iran, that Iran can have nuclear weapons, Iran can be hostile. So that is why let us take good approach. Also, the post-Gaza conflict is something that US is trying to assure that if we are all part of these accords, we will be taking more constructive action in Palestine regions too, in Gaza too. Now, why it matters for us? This is our main concern. Firstly, we have this prominent look-west approach. For example, we are talking about integrating Middle East as a region. That is why we are also part of the I2U2 alliance, which is also known as the West Asian Quad. We have covered this many times. In the comment section, you let me know what are the countries. Also, we are trying to have a good initiative where we are trying to link Mumbai with Europe. And this is the region where we are using Saudi for the rail routes, road routes, and even Israel, its ports. But if such conflicts go on in the Middle East due to Iran and US and Israel, such things cannot take place properly, right? So that is why we have to engage with this group also properly, so that our investments do not go, astray. And at the end of the day, if you can sum everything up, this is a kind of a de-hyphenation strategy, where we are trying to take selective approaches in a very cautious way. So now we'll be moving on to the last article of the day, where Germany and Netherlands are thinking of doing something better for the overall security of the region. This is where firstly we have the NATO. NATO is a security alliance for the Europe and the North America. NATO has been asked in the PYQs too, because of the various members that they have, it is highly important that all of the members are unified, because under Article 5, an attack on one of them is attack on all. So that is why, it is very important for overall security architecture in Europe. Just for your reference, you have to keep in mind, in 2023, Finland joined, 2024, Sweden joined the NATO. Now, one of our main aspect in this entire article is regarding the one German-Netherlands Corps, which is located in Münster, which is a city in Germany. 1GNC, established in 1995, traditionally served as a sub-regional headquarter for the various military protection, housing of the various armed forces for the collective defense. So, NATO has so many corps situated around the European continent and also in North America. But in 2026, as of now, yesterday, what happened? Netherlands and Germany have moved their eastern flank to Estonia and Latvia. If you can understand, Estonia and Latvia are located around the Baltic Sea, right? And actually these are known as Baltic Sea along with Lithuania. These are actually ex-Soviet republics, which are right now both EU and NATO members. That you have to keep in mind. And if you can see also that Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia, if we can talk all of them as Baltic states, they are actually connected via land border to Russia, Belarus, right? And also it is sharing maritime boundaries with Finland, right? So this means that, these countries become highly important for the security apparatus, because Russia and Belarus is actually on one side, right? Even if you can see here, Russia is located here too. So this means that it is kind of sandwiched between Russia, being a NATO ally, being an EU member, it is very, very close to Russia. So definitely the security tensions will be always be in these Baltic nations, mainly across this Suwalki Gap. It's a 100-kilometer long narrow roadway, if you can see, right? This is gap here. If you can just look at this one, it is trying to connect this part of Russia, which is Kaliningrad, with Belarus, right? And this also runs via Poland. So this means that at any one point time in the future, right, using this gap, Russia can actually take hold of some territories in this region too, or cause some other issues. So this is why, a second headquarter is being shifted from Germany, Netherlands to this particular region here. But in 2026, a new system where we have two headquarters, one at Poland, the earlier one, and right now Estonia or Latvia. Right? So this is where we have to keep in mind that previously also in 2025, Baltic Sentry program was also done by NATO, where, to protect these Baltic states, there were allegations that NATO sometimes also tried to cut some of the undersea cables which provided internet to the region. Also, there are some hybrid threats from Russia too. So these are all the things that you have to keep in mind. Now, for your examination, I have attached one very important chart. So in this, we have the countries which belong to EU, NATO, Schengen and Eurozone. So just keep in mind those countries which are actually part or not part of these said organizations or frameworks. Now you can, after this, practice this question, and at the end of the day, practice the quiz which is coming up. And finally, let me tell you thank you, all the best and best of luck. Till we meet again.